This is the Das Cube 2, a design by Oskar van Deventer that is publicly available. It has the exact same turns as a regular 3x3 cube, with one restriction. All of the 7 large parts must stay connected at all times. The puzzle physically won't let you make any turns that split them apart, and the mechanism that makes this work is quite interesting. The puzzle has a fairly complicated history of inspiration. This is the Das Cube 2. The original Das Cube by Oskar had the same mechanism, but no stickers on the smaller 3x3 parts. The Das Cube is a 3-dimensional version of the Das Twist puzzle. Aside from that, there's also the Linked Cube by Evgeny Grigoriev, which is a shape modification of the Joint Cube that was conceptualized by the Chinese puzzle designer Fens. The Joint Cube and Linked Cube are functionally identical to the Das Cubes, but the Joint Cube and Linked Cube are externally bandaged as opposed to the Das Cubes, which implement the mechanism internally. This makes the Das Cubes easier to work with, as illegal moves get blocked instantly, rather than part way into the turn. But the Linked Cube is more modular, meaning it can be made into different variants, unlike the Das Cube, which can have at most 3 large edges. Oskar posted the STL files for the Das Cube 2 on his website, linked in the description. So let's take a look at the parts after I finished printing them. So here's all of the parts that I printed for the Das Cube 2. They're all available on Oskar's website, so if you want to download the puzzle's files for yourself, check out the link in the description below. I've already screwed 5 of the centers into the core just to save time, and also to see how well everything fits together. And obviously I'll screw the 6th center into the core after putting all the parts on. Printing all of these parts was relatively straightforward, although one issue I did encounter was with some of these parts, such as these center pieces. It was a bit difficult to print without a raft because just the first layers that actually touched the build plate were minimal. But I did use a raft, and while it did screw the surface finish up pretty badly, I'm going to be sanding all of the stickered surfaces anyway, so I don't think it makes much of a difference. Other than that, honestly, this puzzle was perfectly fine to print. There was nothing really too special about it. I do think it's really cool how this puzzle works. It's basically 2 separate 3x3s that share a single core and center parts. So for example, here's 2 different types of edges, big edge and a little edge, and here's 2 different types of corners, big corner and little corner. And you can see that the big corner goes with the big edge, and the little corner goes with the little edge, and they turn around each other, but if you try to mix them together, they don't really work all that well. So I think that's actually a pretty ingenious way of designing this cube, and it's really cool that these 2 separate 3x3 mechanisms share a single core and set of centerpieces. So here's a picture of what this cube is supposed to look like. Bear in mind it's a different configuration from the original Das Cube, so don't let that confuse you. But yeah, I'll get to assembling it now. So here is the Das Cube 2 assembled. One of the flaws of this concept, not the design, just the concept, is that I can't really test how this cube turns very well, because you can only make turns that don't break apart these large blocks. That's what makes this puzzle have a unique solving experience, but it also means that a lot of moves aren't accessible at any given time. So right now I can test how this move turns, but for example not this one. So when trying to tension this, I'm going to have to just move some parts all around the cube and figure this stuff out. Another problem with this design, I don't know about another, this design's honestly like pretty good. I've had way less issues assembling this than I did the sloppy cube, but a flaw is that I'm pretty sure these center caps don't really stay in that well. And of course, out of spite, as soon as I say that, this center cap doesn't want to fall out. Let's try another one. Yeah, here we go. So these center caps are, I don't know if Oskar added clearances or something for some reason, but these are not going to stay in, so I'm gonna have to glue the caps. And that means that I can't tension the puzzle after I am done with it, which is obviously not fun on a puzzle that I can't actually test the tensions very easily. So I'm going to go through all of those processes. Oh, and the other cap fell off. I'm going to go through all that and then sticker the puzzle up and then take it outside, and we'll see how fun it is to solve. When I actually got to the stickering step though, I ran into an issue. The sticker templates that Oskar provided on his website looked like this, which is clearly not correct for this puzzle. To be fair, this is what happened when I imported them into Silhouette Studio. Maybe in Oskar's design software they were fine. I did email Oskar about this, and he isn't going to do anything about it, so I decided to make my own sticker template for it, because that honestly wasn't that hard. I measured the physical cube with calipers and found out that the big cubies were 20 millimeters and the small ones were 10 millimeters. From there, I designed a basic replica of the face pattern in Onshape. I didn't bother designing every single face individually. I kind of made a mix and match sticker template so that for each individual face, I could just see what I needed and then only cut specifically those stickers. In case Oskar's sticker template doesn't work for anyone else, I've provided a link in the description to where you can get my sticker template. Once I got my template, I stickered up the cube. Now that the Das Cube 2 is all stickered up, I think it looks really nice. Personally, I think the sticker template I made even looks a bit better than Oskar's original. The puzzle is all broken in by now, and it actually turns very smoothly. I didn't even have to lube it. The only minor issue is that sometimes turns can feel like they're blocked, even though you're trying to make a valid move. It's not difficult to just force it a bit harder and make it follow through with the turn. This behavior is just a side effect of how the puzzle works and isn't really a big deal. Anyway, as I'm recording this, I've already solved the Das Cube 2, and genuinely I was blown away by how interesting the solve was. It's just a 3x3 shape mod with a new mechanic added, but it forces you to think of the cube and its parts in entirely new ways. So many of the moves you want to make are just impossible due to the restriction of keeping all the large parts connected. My first solve took several hours and I was genuinely amazed the entire time, with a sprinkle of frustration. I have to give massive props to Oskar for making this cube's files available. It's incredibly fun and I very highly recommend you make one for yourself if you can. It's just that good. So let's see exactly how good the Das Cube 2 is by first scrambling it. Okay, I will admit I've actually solved the Dust Cube 2 once before, and genuinely this was a very difficult and incredibly intriguing puzzle to solve. So I'll use some of what I learned during my first solve to kind of guide you through exactly what I'm doing in the second solve, but the thing is, I don't have like a method or anything. This is going to be a walkthrough solve. This is still going to be fairly exploratory because I've only solved this puzzle once and it took a very long time, and I'm still not sure I fully understand exactly how it works. So let's see. The first thing you notice when solving the Dust Cube 2 is that basic piece movements are a constant struggle. Just the fact that the 7 large pieces have to be kept together is an incredibly restricting rule. So you're constantly looking for moves you can actually make. Alright, so at this point you can actually see that I've solved the white cross. That was not really that bad. I mean, obviously it was still frustrating because I had the restriction of having to keep all of these parts together, but in general I was able to move them around on the yellow layer to kind of prevent them from messing too much up. But now begins by far the most difficult part of this solve. Getting the rest of the F2L pairs in. So that means this corner, this edge, this corner, this edge, and this corner, this edge. I'm actually not going to insert this pair here, because if you remember, in the solved state, this was actually the large pieces that were in this corner. And I'm going to solve those separately after I solve all of the smaller parts. So I'm just going to kind of use this as more of a staging area and not worry about solving this specific F2L pair. So here we have our first F2L pair inserted, and that would be the orange and green ones. So now I just have to do the same thing for the rest of them, and this is progressively going to get more difficult because I'm going to have less and less free space to work with. It is nice that in this state I can move the top layer on its own and the bottom layer on its own. I'm pretty sure that just the fact that you can get the cube into states like this, where you can turn this without any other consequences, makes so that it can scramble more fully, which I think is interesting. Kind of crazy just how much of a struggle creating basic F2L pairs is on the Dust Cube 2. The simple restriction of the fact that all 7 big parts have to be kept together means that realistically there's a finite amount of shapes that they can have. And you'll very quickly learn each of these shapes and what turns you can make from each of them. For example, there's the U shape, where you have unrestricted 90-degree turns on the opposite side, but on the U itself you can only make 2 turns. You can turn one leg of the U in one direction only, and only for one turn, and you can turn the other leg in the opposite direction, also only for one turn. So it's kind of funny how it's really an unrestricted position on one layer and a very restrictive position on another. And you kind of have a small edge that's trapped on the layer with the U that you can't really do much about. I genuinely hope that this cube gets more popular as time goes by, because it's really fascinating, and I think it would be really fun to solve if people developed, more efficient techniques to solve it, rather than constantly having to attempt to get pieces paired together. And here we are. I've completed another F2L pair, the orange and blue ones. And what's interesting is that this green and red one is not paired up, but this yellow side one is, which is honestly the opposite of what I'd want it to be, because I think my next step is going to be this green and red one, getting it paired up and getting it in there. So we'll see how that goes. Something that was really unexpected about the DasCube 2 solving experience is the fact that even once you have an F2L pair complete, that would be a corner next to an edge and they're in the correct orientations, even when you have that, it can still be really hard to actually get that pair into the position that it belongs on the cube. Just, the geometry doesn't work out all the time. Sometimes, no matter what you do, it's actually not possible to easily insert the pair. You can get all the way up to the last turn you need to make, and the 7 big parts just aren't lined up for that, so you can't make it. So you actually have to use some really counterintuitive positioning to get these pairs in. Although this is realistically only something that I've noticed on the last 2 pairs. I'd have much less trouble putting in the first 2, because I guess there's overall more slots in which to store parts, and overall more freedom of movement on the puzzle. Okay, so now you can see all of the relevant F2L pairs have been inserted. We have green-red, we have orange-green, and we have blue-orange. And basically, now what I'm going to do is I guess I can populate this last F2L pair. But basically, the way this works is, this is roughly the solved shape of the puzzle. I think technically it goes the other way or something. Yeah, I think this is a mirror image of the actual solved state. But in any case, I am basically done with the first 2 layers. That genuinely took a lot less time than it did the first time around. So I am kind of glad about that, because now I had more of an idea of what worked last time and what didn't. In any case, now I guess I'll work on solving the last layer. This shouldn't be that bad, actually. Let's just see if I can do it right now. There it is. Okay, this is the solved shape of the puzzle. I don't know if these can be switched around, these 2 edges. I don't think this corner can be twisted on its own, though. But, I don't know. In both of the solves I've done, these 2 edges have been in the correct spot on the last layer. Thank goodness, because doing any kind of OLL algorithm on this would be complete and utter nightmare. Maybe they could also be flipped, I don't know. Or maybe the puzzle is just limited geometrically enough to the point where that's not a possibility. But anyway, the last step of this solve is going to be... Actually, not the last step. What I like to do first is insert this pair. So that would be the blue, red, and white. The reason why I like doing that is because that kind of gives me a baseline from which I can base where I put the other parts of this cube. So I guess I'll first pair up the blue-red edge with this corner, put them here, and then I'll try adjusting all the other parts. And by the way, if I was solving a joint cube or a linked cube, I would already be done, as all of these parts would look identical. So this is definitely more of a solve than those puzzles. I think it would be really interesting to get just a regular DasCube, the one where the smaller parts are not stickered, and just see the configurations in which the 7 bigger parts can get themselves into when you're not worried about solving the smaller parts and not breaking them up. Because the 7 parts on the DOS Cube 2 can really get scrambled in all kinds of ways. You can have 2 swapped edges, you can have 2 rotated corners, and these are positions that you can't easily solve because almost no algorithms actually work on this cube. It would also be really interesting to plug this cube into a simulator and just see what kind of algorithms it would come up with. Alright, so finally the first 2 layers are done. You can see that the blue-red edge and the blue-red-white corner are in their correct spots. So now all I have to do is cycle around these yellow parts, and what's good about having this baseline here is it gives me something that I know not to touch. I know only to use moves that cycle around these parts and not these. Alright, so after enough sledgehammers, I believe I have paired everything I need to. You can see that I have a pair here, this pair, and this lone corner, which probably goes roughly here. So now I just have to figure out how to put all of these pairs and the lone corner into their correct spots. At this point, my solve unfortunately kind of disintegrated. Basically, during my first solve at this point, I was able to just get everything in using sledgehammers and other basic moves, and I didn't give it much more thought than that. But in this case, it turns out that one of the pairs I made actually turned out to be the wrong one, and as a result, no amount of just simpler moves was able to put all of the 7 parts back in their correct spots. So at this point I decided to turn off the camera and play with the cube for a while on my own, just to see if I could get it solved. So this will be the last of the time lapses, but I am almost done with the cube anyway. Just a quick update, after a lot of cycling things around, I actually have everything solved except this corner needs to be turned and this corner needs to be turned. So I'm not exactly sure how I'm going to solve that, but I just wanted to give you a quick progress update on where I am in the solve. After a lot more maneuvering, I've finally finished solving the DOS Cube 2. During this second solve, I struggled a lot less with the first 2 layers, but the last 7 large parts ended up being in a configuration that was significantly more difficult to solve, so that specific portion of the solve took me a lot longer than before. I will say that I haven't exactly been gentle with this puzzle, and it's still holding up just fine, so durability isn't really a concern for the DOS Cube 2. I highly recommend printing this puzzle for yourself. As for the relative ease of building it, it provides a truly phenomenal solving experience. Oskar has created an incredibly interesting puzzle, and huge thanks to him for providing the files publicly for free. Thank you all very much for watching, and have a great day.